if we say that grading is subjective, then it's going to be the interpretation of the person who owns the book as to what they feel it is. So Pinky goes under P, N, Patriotica. We'll do one more. This is from Eclipse Books, a publisher who's no longer in existence. Due to a lawsuit because of printing a book and not paying the royalties. So this is Red Dog. Oh my gosh. That's interesting. This isn't Red Dog Comics. It says Red Dog Comics on it. Red Dog Comics #1. Interesting. It's actually Night Music. So Eclipse Comics, that was in Forestville, California. And that was their original warehouse. They had a flood, so then they had to move later on. Interesting. I'm just going to take a look at Night Music. Now there's also websites that you can go to that has a lot of this type of information. I just haven't got my computer here at the moment. Night Music, an 11-issue series. This is interesting information. Sometimes I'll file it twice in the database. I'll put it under Red Dog because let's say you're in a store and you're buying right away. You want to check and see what it is, but the book could probably be in a bag and board. It takes a little bit of time to open things. A lot of retailers don't like you opening their books in the store because you may cause more damage. As I say, when you're in a store and you're looking for things and you're going through your database, you may have it filed under Night Music because that's the proper title. But if you've not seen this book before, and I had not seen this book before, and when I purchased online, I was just looking at the fact that it was Red Dog Comics #1, which was right on the cover. So I'll put it in my database twice. Once as Red Dog Comics with a footnote in the comments area that it's actually Night Music #7. So in grading, well, you take a look at the book originally, and if you just hold it normally, you'll be able to see a couple of creases there, sort of idea. And you'd probably say, yeah, 8.0. Yeah, it's got a scuff on the box back here and a little bit of where the ink came off. It was wet, or maybe there was some scuffing that was involved. So it's a 7.5. But let's count. Let's do a count here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And these are right into the paper. It's not like just having a bend or a dent. It's an actual crease. 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so 7, 8. So there's at least 8 things damaged in here. So we've got a crease up top with a little bit of scuffing. Corners are relatively sharp, which is nice. That generally adds to the value. But there's crease here, crease here, crease here, crease here, dent there. The cover itself, by getting the glare on the cover, don't see any creases or bends in the cover. On the front, there is a bend here where somebody held it, with their thumb. There's a bend up here, but there's a crease there, there. A little bit of a dent there. There's some scratching on the cover. It's if somebody wants to be really picky, and obviously the book was read because the spine is cracked. It's not split, but it has a little bit of a cracking to it. Now this cracking can also happen when the book is absolutely new, sort of thing. So I keep it in mind, but it may or may not detract from the grade, especially when you're going from a very fine to a fine condition. And some light scratching. So I'm just going to call this a 6.0, and I should be pretty darn close on that. So again, the title, and this is Red Dog #1, but it's actually Night Music #7, February 1998. Eclipse Comics from Forest Hill, California. A fine grade, and 8 visible issues with the book. And this just helps, as I say, with the practice. So when you're buying things, you know what to look for. Let's take a look right now at something new. Let me file this first. Freedom Fighters. Freedom Fighters number 4 just came out. So at the store I go to, I'm what's called a subscriber. That's they know what to pull for me monthly, so when the comics come in on a Monday or a Tuesday, they get automatically pulled off the shelf, put in a bag, and then set aside for me. No, they don't put them in a bag. I put them in a bag and board. So they pull them off the shelf. So think about it. The book is printed. Somebody packs those books into a box. That box gets shipped across the country to a warehouse. That warehouse either keeps them in the box because of the amount of orders that a particular store has for that particular book. So if they're ordering, and I'm sorry, I don't know how many fit into a case, but let's say there's 200 books in a case. Those have been handled maybe once or twice, once off the assembly line and then the person packing them into the box. So that's 2 people handling that book to start with. There could be damage that's created right from those particular practices. It might even be that the comic itself has some damage to it because of during the printing process something happens. And I'm not going to call it damage, but sometimes what happens is there may be a double cover. There may be extra pages put in. There may be pages that are put in backwards. And some people will only collect books that have certain characteristics that would be considered damage like that. Sometimes the cover is put on upside down. Sometimes the pages are, instead of being folded from 1 to 10, it would be folded the opposite way, and then it's bound into the book that way. Anyway, it makes it interesting for collecting. So, as I was saying, the books are handled they're sent to the warehouse. The guy in the warehouse will redistribute them to the stores. When they come into the stores, they're handled not only by the staff and put into bags, then they'd be put on the shelf, and then they'd be handled by people. The reason for this story is that there's a lot of handling that goes on, and every time you handle a book, you could create some imperfection to that book. It would be nice if every book that came out of the store was in a gem condition to start out with, but that's just not the case. There's 1, 2, 1, and near the staple 2, 2 dents, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, I'm going to be picky today. So 8, 9, kind of a dent there, 10, 11, where the book was held up here and put in like this. So it created a little bit of a thumb point at the top there. It was also probably first held like this, then held like that. You almost have to be Sherlock Holmes to do this kind of thing to tell. But it's added damage to the book. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. This is why I say in a 17 points of interest. It's good to write this down to keep in mind, because if you were buying this at a show, if you were buying this from the retailer, they're not going to take this type of consideration to the book because it takes time. As I say, in a 10-point grading system, if I was to take 17 points at that off this right away, we'd be looking at, something that would be unreasonable as far as grading goes. So I'd have to say that there's 10 points between, in this case, it's certainly not gem condition. It's certainly not 10. 10 usually means that there's 0 flaws. Try and find that. That's really, really difficult. But in this case, there's 17 flaws in the book, and I can't really even call them flaws, or just as I originally called them, points of interest to suggest a grade on it. I'd have to say again, because 17, it's looking like it's in that very fine plus. And what I'm saying is that if we take those 17 flaws that are 2 to 3 millimeters, let's say 3 times 17, 51. That's 51 centimeters of a flaw, but we can't really call it. If a flaw was actually that big, the best that book would be a very fine minus, which would be 2 grades below this. But I can't even call it that because it still, perceptually looks. And this is where the interpretation comes in. The subjectiveness of grading comes in to take a look at something. So this was number 4. This is called the Indicia, and it came out in May 2019. Now you might think it's only March. Why does it say May? This stems back to originally when comics were only sold not through the specialty stores, but sold in grocery stores. In the grocery stores, they had a certain date to return it. They had an arrival date, which would be, in this case, last Wednesday it was put on the shelf. But they have till May before they would return it to the distributor to get a refund on their purchase. So they use that date, the May date, on the book as a reminder to be able to send their books back so they can get some credit for it. And that's a brand new comic right off the shelf. Now I'm going to grab some books that were professionally graded. Okay, so what I did was I grabbed a bunch of professionally graded books. This company, CGC, you send them your raw copy. They encase it in a vacuum sealed plastic case and then put another hard plastic shell over top of it. So it'd be difficult to substitute a book. When the company first started, people were able to do that, so some books did get swapped around, but that would also crack the case and devalue the book. This is a very well protected way of keeping your books, but it's also very, very expensive too. I believe the cases are $5 each for the plastic case, but to vacuum seal it, I don't know of a home process of doing that. There's several companies that do this type of thing. PGX is another one, and there's a new guy on the block as well. The idea of getting a professional graded book too is so that you can see what your grading style is against theirs, because in the retail industry there's always been some discrepancy where people have said, oh well, that doesn't look 3.5. I would say that that's more of a 2. But at least what happens with this particular company is they have, my understanding is that they have 3 people who actually look at the book. They have no attachment to collecting comics whatsoever, so they're just looking at a point of view of just being a book that they're grading. Sometimes I will buy a book just because of the cover. In the case of Doom Patrol, it's been a favorite of mine since the 60s. Now it's a TV series as well. This was a silver foil cover that was limited, and that was one of the better conditions that I saw it available in, so I was able to snag it. I wanted to get something that was close to gem mint as possible. 9.9 was the best I was able to get. It's very difficult to hold these up in the light to see any flaws, to find out why it isn't a 10. Looks like they sealed something inside of it with the book. Oh well. As I say, it is open to interpretation. Some of the flaws that I do see are not on the book, but on the case, a scratch on the case. And I sometimes wonder too if the book was possibly through handling was, and I hate to use that, a concern was created just putting it in there. There's your 9.9 right there. That little flaw right there. Possibly. But the spine looks really, really good. No scratches on the book that I could see. No dents on the book that I could see. No bends or folds on the spine that I could see. That was the only part that I could see that. And that's the story of grading from my point of view. And as I say, the word subjective is going to mean something different to everybody, and the value that you put on a book is really your own interpretation from your point of interest to the value of that book because it's a key issue. So that's my take on grading now. On our next video, we're going to talk a little bit about the Midnight Comics Library and what I'm trying to do with this particular project, as I've been working on it for a number of years now. You can see it's been an interesting project. Hopefully you'll stay tuned.